Let's welcome in our guest, Yogi Roth, Big Ten Network. He knows college football as well as anybody. Good to see you again, buddy.
Yes.
Yogi puts on a lot of clinics. You were in Oregon yesterday.
I was.
How
on
was
the
that?
Nike headquarters. Football heaven. It was amazing. It was the Nike Kickoff Classic, third annual one. Scott Henson, Matt James, they put it on. You would have loved it. It was girls flag football, a team from South Anchorage against a team from New Orleans, De La Salle. That was off the hook. And then the boys' game was Massillon, Ohio, undefeated, defending state champs. I mean, this is a school that has 16,000 people coming to games in Ohio. It's amazing. And they played NFL Academy out of the UK, out of London. Their team is represented by players from 19 different countries or territories. Like, you look at the offensive line, it was Hong Kong, Finland, Sweden, France. And football's huge in Europe, as you know, if you follow the European League of Football. The Paris Musketeers are rolling.
Oh, yeah,
We're 10-2 right now. It's a team that I get to work with in the offseason. So it was amazing, but it was fun to get in the flow of calling some games. And here we are, man, on the precipice of week one.
It's weird. Everybody loves pickleball as like a big new sport in America. I don't know. Do you play it all, or have you?
I've never played.
It's super
but
fun.
I want to play with our son, Zane. Yeah.
But flag football is emerging as like really huge. Where we are in the South Bay, there's now girls teams, and that wasn't happening like 5 years ago.
Oh, man, it's awesome.
It's real. High school teams have flag football.
Yeah, I mean, look at what's going to happen in 28. It's boys or men and women playing in the Olympics.
Yeah.
I mean, we saw you reference Caleb Williams talking about it on Hard Knocks.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not very successul, but I'm a head coach of our flag team in Mar Vista, Venice Beach, the Short
nice.
Avenue Dolphins. But it's just really fun to watch, and especially when you look at the safety of the game, the future of the game, and now football. Football is in over 70 countries. Right, I referenced the team in Paris. There's games in Brazil, not just NFL games going there, but club teams. So it is a global sport, and it's going to be amazing when it comes here to L.A. I keep talking to like Coach Carroll or Chip Kelly. I'm like, you guys going to be the head coach of this team? Like, what are you going to do? Like, you can imagine offensively or defensively. Like, I wonder how just everybody involved in the Olympics can decide who are the players, who are the coaches. I mean, in the sport and in the U.S., we should just rock in flag football.
It should be ours.
Yeah.
All right, so you moved from the Pac-12 network to Big Ten. Big Ten's going to be massive this year. How are you feeling about like the whole realignment? I know some people get skittish and they're like, oh, no, we need to be traditional. I'm assuming you love it.
Well, I think there's a lot of layers to it. I mean, my heart breaks for the 200 people that don't have a job that were my colleagues for over 12 years, right, by no fault of their own. So I'll always lead with that. Like, a lot of talented people still looking for work. But also, when you look at the games and the nature of the game, there's two conferences that have emerged. And I'm honored to be a part of one of them with the Big Ten Network. The people have been amazing since I've been there. The Jerry DiNardos of the world. I mean, they just embraced myself and Guy Haberman and Ashley Adamson and Rhett Lewis, like all the people that are new to this network. So that has been fun. And then I got to be honest, I just got off the road of visiting, I think, out to 12 campuses in training camp. So to see Penn State, Ohio State, and Michigan, and then know they're going to be playing the likes of Oregon and Washington and UCLA and SC. It is exciting in this era of football, especially with an expanded playoff. So it's reality. I've decided instead of complaining about it, I'm going to be entertained by it. I'm going to enjoy it. I can't wait to get to places like Nebraska, places I haven't gone to since I played. I grew up on the East Coast, man, but I've been out here for 20 years. So now to be able to call games in some of these iconic venues, I'm excited for it.
Yeah. And
then we'll see if it's I highly doubt realignment's over. Like, something else may happen. Who knows when or how? You know, I'm always thinking about the Cougs and Beavs. I mean, those two got completely hosed by this thing. Yeah. And I think they're going to be America's teams. Like, you look at Washington State. Bro, if they beat Texas Tech and beat UW in the Apple Cup, if anybody who's ever played sports, how do you not cheer for the Cougs? I just think the whole country is going to be behind these programs if they can have early success.
Okay, I mean, that's a take I didn't see coming. Everybody rooting for Washington State.
Well, think, what did they do? Other than, I mean, they've won more than a lot of the teams that are currently in Power 4 leagues. You look at Oregon State, they had a first-round pick in the offensive line last year. It's not like these teams have been down.
Yeah.
Like, look at Gardner Minshew. Like, there's storylines. So I look forward to watching, you know, they say up there, like, welcome to the fight. Like, it's kind of their fight. And these are small schools in terms of chips on their shoulders. So it'll be fun. I know they got a game or two on Fox. So it'll be fun to track them throughout the fall. Jake Dicker, Trent Bray in his first season.
You mentioned Nebraska, kind of offhand. Nebraska hasn't been good in forever. But their quarterback is, you saw him up close. I'm sure you meet with him. He's really got the Patrick Mahomes starter kit. He's trying everything in his power to look like him, from the throws to the shades, the hair.
Yeah, he's a special player, Dylan Raiola. He's a 5-star quarterback recruit. His father played there. His uncle coaches there at Nebraska. He's committed to a couple schools in recruiting, but came to the Elite 11, which is the quarterback camp that you referenced. And look, just to be blunt, when it comes to quarterbacks, it doesn't always work. Like I wrote a book on it called 5-Star QB with Joey Roberts, and you look at 140. There's been 140 5-star quarterbacks in the history of recruiting. Only 7 have been drafted number 1, and I don't need to say their first name because you know when I say Jameis, when I say Trevor, when I say Kyler, when I say Caleb, you know who they are. Only 20, I think, have been drafted in the first round. Over 50% of them transferred once. Almost 20% have transferred twice now. Oh. So it's not like an exact science. Right. So much has to happen. But for him, and I'll be there week 3, and they play Colorado week 2, he's got as good a shot as anybody. And I think what I love most is his head coach in terms of the system around him. So much of these quarterbacks having success, and you know this, you guys talk about all the time, is the situation you're in, the team you're in, but it's really the people you're around. Because right now in recruiting, you are a ranking, you wear a helmet, and you're likely known as a transaction because that's just the nature of the game. So I really believe that the successful head coaches in recruiting are ones that front load the mental skills, front load making sure we get to know the human. Every time I've talked into that, and anybody on that staff, of course, Matt Rule, the head coach, that's where they lean into. So I think he's in a healthy environment. It won't be easy, much like Bo Nix. It's not going to be easy in his opener, the first couple months of the season. But I think he's got all the tools. I mean, he can just do unique things that a lot of quarterbacks who played for a while in college football just can't do.
So how did they end up with him? Because you said 5-star. What was it, Georgia he committed to? And then...
Yeah, he was, I think it was Ohio State when he was a sophomore, junior. Then it was Georgia. And then I think a lot of these guys, as they look at recruiting, they just look at what is the best fit. And I think in high school recruiting, it's different than the portal in recruiting. Right. In high school, think about being 14 years old. You love when your phone's blown up, and it's every coach in America. You love doing these interviews. But by the time you're 16, 17, I think a lot of that shine has worn off. You know, we ask athletes every year at the Elite 11, I call it the wonder switch. Like, how many of you guys, your wonderment has been turned off? Your imagination has been turned off around the joy of the game? Most hands raise because they're like, yeah, it's like a business. I got to take all these calls in recruiting. But at some point, I think you settle back down. You find out, all right, what matters most to me? With great clarity, what do I want in my college experience? And I think for Dylan Raiola, he was looking at, it'd be pretty cool to play at this iconic place. Maybe I could be a part of this thing coming back with this now second-year head coach. Play at a place where my dad was a legend, where my uncle is a coach on the staff, and I could play early. Like, he wasn't going to go beat out Carson Beck in year 1. So I like it. I'm a huge fan of quarterbacks going to a place where it's healthy. And I think every situation is totally different. Georgia's healthy for a lot of players. I think for him, he looked at Nebraska and was like, all right, I got an opportunity to do something special, and I think he's going to.
You mentioned Beck. Listen, I think he started 14 games.
Baller.
You've known him longer than I have. I like him a lot. I think he's #1 pick potential. But do we need to see a little more before we really crown him? Hey, this guy's going to be a #1 pick in
Well, I mean, you guys have someone who sits here in Mark Sanchez, you know, every week it seems like, and he only played in, 13 games?
13, yeah.
Right? So I think everybody is different. I think when you come from a program like he does, it's so competitive every day. He's on scout team, and he was having to bring it his best his first year. And then he backed up a guy who is one of the more iconic players in the history of the game, a former walk-on turned 2-time national champion in Stetson Bennett. So the lessons learned, I think, just bring a maturity. I think right now in the quarterback position, a lot of quarterbacks in college think about dipping early. Maybe I didn't play. Maybe it's not going great. I just give so much credence to players like Carson Beck or Miller Moss who just said, I'm going to sit, learn, and when I play, I'm going to rip. And I love that about him because he did that last year. I mean, he's a couple snaps away from being in the playoff again. I think it's safe to assume we should expect Georgia among the top 12 teams in college football. Where they win the SEC, we'll find out. Yeah. But he's got all the tools to be an NFL player.
That's an interesting take because, you know, when you think about starting a business, the best way is to just start the business. You know, you can learn hands-on doing the business as opposed to kind of watching, like you said, backing up. I mean, Beck sat for 3 years, basically, was it?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's tough, whereas as opposed to Dylan Gabriel, who I think UCF, right, was it? And then goes to Oklahoma and then now Oregon. And he's just all over the place playing all the time. Or even Bo Nix with, I think, 61 college starts.
Yeah, so all different stories, right? Yeah. And I think the context is so important. Like, just had Dylan Gabriel on my podcast, Why Option, which was great because we talked about his context around his career. This is a guy coming out of high school, out of Mililani High School in Hawaii, and he was on his way to one of the academies. He didn't have a lot of offers. Oh. And then the last minute, Georgia and SC come in and offer him out of high school. And he goes, I don't know. And what mattered most to him, again, I said reference earlier, like what matters most is one of the things that we talked, that was the theme of Elite 11 this year. It was asking the quarterbacks truly what matters most to you. Is it NIL? Is it shine on social media? Is it playing early? What is it? And it's okay, but you just got to be confident in whatever the answer is. For Dylan, he wanted to play. So he said, I'm going to UCF because I know I can go play instead of go to SC. And, you know, from Hawaii to USC is a pipeline. Yeah. That is kind of the school that a lot of kids over there, especially quarterbacks, dream of going to play at. And he said, no, I want to go play. So he does, and he goes and starts. And then he goes, I want to play at a bigger stage after Scott Frost leaves. And he says, okay, I'm going to keep going. And where does he go a couple years later after getting injured? He ends up going to Oklahoma. Balls out. The plan for him there, and he referenced this in our conversation, was he wanted to just do that year or do that second year and then go to league. You get your draft report back, and you're like, it wasn't what I hoped. Right. I want to keep playing. Well, they have Jackson Arnold, who was a 5-star quarterback, extremely talented. So he said, I'm going to honor the system. I'm going to go find another place. And he finds one of the healthiest programs, I think, in the country under Dan Lanning in Oregon. And he may, if he's healthy, I hope he is. I'll be there this week calling their opener, or next week, I should say. He's going to have more starts than Bo Nix, who has the most in the history of college football, if he can just get through the regular season. So I'm a huge fan of Dylan Gabriel, the way that he's connected to that team. Think about his NIL deal. I don't know if you know it, but instead of getting like a Maserati, he got a van. He got a minivan so he could pack his receivers in there and take them to go training. So again, I go back to like what matters most. For him, it was playing early, and now it's connecting to his teammates. For Carson, it was going to an iconic program, sitting, learning, letting rip. Miller Moss, same deal. He dreamt as a 6-year-old. That picture went viral the other day of just wanting to go to SC. He sat and waited. He could have transferred to a ton of schools across the country and played earlier. But he said, no, this is my place. So again, I go back to whether it's Dylan Raiola or Carson or Miller or Dylan Gabriel, what matters most to you, and find clarity around it.
There's no right path. There, you know, everybody has their own. Like my kids are doing volleyball right now, and, you know, there's tryouts. And this team probably going to sit on the bench, but they're going to be good. This team, not going to be great, but you're going to play a lot. Like, what matters more to you? And I don't, with college football, it seems a lot more difficult because coaches are fired all the time, and the NIL money. Like, I don't know. I know a college basketball player who left the West Coast for, just say, the SEC, and he's getting like $500,000.
Right. It's crazy.
Like, that's real coin. And in football, it's got to be more than that, right?
Yeah, and it's a hard thing to navigate. That's why out of high school, I think high school recruiting is going to start taking a hit, especially at the quarterback position, because if you're a blue blood program, yes, there's a world where you find a guy to high school and develop him, but if you aren't sure about him, like look at SC. Miller Moss throws 6 touchdowns in the Holiday Bowl. You guys called that game. It was awesome. If he doesn't do that, do they end up taking somebody in the portal because they're just maybe unsure? I don't know. It's a fair conversation, but and I think the quote from Lincoln Riley afterwards was like, he just made it really difficult for guys in the portal to think they're going to go beat him out because of what he did in that game. And I think it's different because in the portal, it's truly a business decision. Quarterbacks are saying, all right, where can I go play? Where can I go ball? They're not even trying to take official visits with fancy dinners and a bunch of love. They don't need any of that swag. It's a different environment than it is when you're out of high school and you're navigating recruiting for the first time. So there's a maturity that is entering college football. And as I project it forward in a 12-team playoff where you could play 16, 17 games, the mature teams are going to win. And that's why I look at front runners this year. Look at Quinn Ewers, what he went through at Ohio State, coming to his state of Texas in his backyard, navigating that. You look at what Dylan Gabriel has had to navigate. Look at last year, the 3 quarterbacks in New York, all transfers. Jaden Daniels, he went through a lot at Arizona. So he took a ton of flack when he left that program. And it was very inappropriate for everybody who called him out. Like, look at what he was looking at every day, and he made a decision that was best for him. Look how it played out. Bo Nix, he loved Auburn. He said this many times publicly. He's told me many times, but he wanted a fresh start. And he started playing with joy again. Michael Penix Jr., the injuries at Indiana. Look at what happened in his career. So many of these layers to a nuanced conversation, I think, need to get elevated versus he's good, he's not, he's $1 million, he's not. And that is a challenge right now for the athletes. So I think even as broadcasters, it's on us, whether it's at the Big Ten Network or Fox, to take the helmet off as the game is on and share who these young men are.
That's difficult. It is a nuanced conversation. Not a lot of nuance in sports TV, as you know. People just want to yell at each other. But let me ask you, like Joe Burrow falls into that bucket. He goes to Ohio State, was what, 3rd or 4th in the quarterback room. Urban Meyer was like, he's all right. Goes to LSU. He was only okay at LSU that first year. Remember? It's like 15 touchdowns. And then something clicked. And he's like 22, 23 years old and has like the greatest season in college football history. So I mean, I'm sure some of these guys ask you straight up, what do you think I should do, Yogi? What, I don't know. Or the parents, they come and ask you, what do you think?
Yeah.
And how do you navigate that?
Well, I tell them the same thing that I say every year at the Elite 11 finals, right? And it's why even like what I'm doing now with the Big Ten or with like my Y Option newsletters, kicking out advice from players, just pulling snippets, pulling quotes, because the facts don't lie. I referenced earlier, 140 5-star QBs in the history of the world, only 20 drafted in the first round. And the definition of a 5-star quarterback is someone who can change a franchise. You know how many quarterbacks have won a Super Bowl that were a 5-star quarterback?
I'll go 2.
I'll go 1.
Oh.
In year 13, team 2, and it was Matthew Stafford. So most aren't going to live up to that hype. So again, I go back to, can you front load skills? So what do I tell parents? I say, I'm never going to tell you or recommend where to go, but I will give you some tools along the way. Tool number 1, what matters most? I just keep going back to that phrase. And what is front loaded when you walk into the building? And when I talk to coaches, Dan Lanning's a great example. I'm a huge fan of what he's built there and will build. I think he's going to take up a lot of the space that is left by one of your colleagues and former colleagues, whether it was Harbaugh now in the NFL or whether it was when Urban Meyer left or Nick Saban left. Like there was just oxygen in college football that people get to take up. Well, I think Dan Lanning's going to take it up. And why do I say it? Because when players walk in, I think there's this notion at Oregon that it's just like, oh, here's all the money in the world, come onto the team. Yeah. That's the last thing they talk about. They front load connection, growth, toughness. Are you willing to sacrifice? Those are the 4 pillars of their DNA traits. And then from there, how do you fit in within the culture? Because if it's one of those transactional deals, it doesn't work. Now, a lot of teams can't do that because they just need to fill bodies. Yeah. We just need roster spots. And that's why it's so fun to watch a place like Colorado. What are they going to be like this year? You look at Michigan State. What are they going to be like this year? Because they have to find the right guy. But in the portal era, it's hard to do that. So back to the last thing, what do I tell the parents? I say, let's just make sure someone's building your son's confidence. Because praise and blame are all the same. And they are going to get hit from every different direction, usually directly to their mobile phone. So if you're not front loading the mental skills, you're going to be challenged. I mean, you could train 3 things, bro. You can train your craft, your arm, you can train your body, and you can train your mind. Yeah. So the coaches that are doing that, the programs that are doing that, that's where I tell parents, those are the places you want to continue to go back and unearth more detail. It
seems like a lot of, and again, maybe I'm speculating, a lot of kids are afraid to fail, right? You don't want to go somewhere, hey, I don't want to go for the quarterback job at my number 1 choice and lose. Oh, man, then I sit out, then I'm going to have to transfer. People seem like kind of afraid of failing. How do you talk to them about that?
Yeah, well, I don't know if I'd agree with that. Oh. I think that coming out of high school, guys want to go for it. I really think it's really healthy. I think when you get to college, that's where it becomes a challenge. And why do I say that? Because it's so easy to dip. I'm all for the transfer portal. Yeah. And I'm all for NIL. But I believe that if you sign a deal at a school, maybe it should be for more than 6 months. Maybe it should be for a year and a half. Maybe it should be for 2 years. Okay. We're just coming out of a couple days where all these schools are naming their starting quarterback. So the backups have an opportunity. Prior to school starting, you can transfer. And you'll start seeing some of that. Different coaches, different people, different collectives getting into the DMs, of these players. Well, they have to navigate within themselves and say, okay, at some point, whether I go to the Broncos or the Steelers, I'm going to have to compete. You don't just get handed a job anywhere. That's not how it works. Look at Boise State. Malachi Nelson was a 5-star quarterback, went up there, got beat out. Well, he's going to be just fine. He's just going to keep competing. And that's what I keep telling these guys is, look, you just can't dip. If you want to transfer, wait till the end of the season. Really give yourself an opportunity to meet adversity and find a way to navigate through that versus dip. And that is the challenge because everyone's in your ear or in your DMs or in your mentions saying, go, you're getting hosed, you're getting hosed. Yeah. And that's why I think it's always a challenge here in LA to play because you have an internal reality, which is when you turn on the film, what are you doing on the tape at SC or UCLA? Then externally, a lot of local players, hey, man, you should be playing. You're the man. You were the best in high school. And that is where, that's where the best coaches come in. Yeah. Just like a parent, just like you will with the volleyball team. You got to cut through it. Yeah. And again, say, okay, man, what matters most? Do you care about a degree? Do you care about playing here? Are you open to developing? If so, you might be Carson Beck or Miller Moss versus going on your 3rd or 4th school if you're not playing.
We could wrap up with Dabo Sweeney, who, for whatever reason, refuses to embrace the transfer portal. Now, I read a story in the Wall Street Journal where the Ivy Leagues are not doing NIL. They don't have collectives. They're trying maybe now at Harvard. But as a result, you saw all the best basketball players transfer out because they can go get 300, 400,000 elsewhere. And the Ivy Leagues, we got our Ivy League degrees. Dabo Sweeney seems to be like, no thanks on the NIL and the transfer portal. I am curious where you come in on. Do you think you'll have to change and start to accept transfers?
Yeah, I think eventually he will. Like, let's look at Ohio State. They don't have 37 transfers. They have some of the best players in America, like Caleb Downs, who transferred. They have a running back who transferred. They just got very specific. I think different programs are at different stages. So early on, you take over a job, you're at Michigan State, I think they have 61 new faces. Okay, it's year one. You lost a bunch of guys. You had to add a bunch of guys. Colorado, of course, was famous for that. Arizona State had to do that. That's going to be the norm in year one of programs. But when you're established, Clemson is an established culture. I think it's all about supplementation in the portal. I still believe if you look at the best teams, Bama, Georgia, Ohio State, let's just talk at the teams that have gone to the playoff. Look at Washington last year, Michigan. Primarily, there were teams that won with guys that had been there 3 or 4 years, especially in the trenches, offensive, defensive line. Then they supplement it. Right? Okay. You find a quarterback, you need an edge rusher, find an offensive lineman. Like, you just get a couple guys. That is the way. Like, I go back to, and it's old school, but when I was coaching at SC under Pete Carroll, our mantra was recruit the daylights out of basically Bakersfield to San Diego, and then only leave for a first-round pick. Well, now if you were in the portal era and you're Clemson, I'm saying, all right, only go into the portal for an early day 1 or day 2 NFL draft pick. And I think that's probably the way that if I had to project they will go, because I just came off this tour. Oregon, Ohio State are different animals. I'm telling you, bro. They are different animals from a roster standpoint. Some of those guys are portal guys, but some of those guys are in their 2nd or 3rd year who transferred in. So there's ways you can add to your room and not just say, come save us this year because we need split end or we need an edge rusher, but we might be thinking 2 years down the line. You might just have finished your freshman year at college, and now you come in, you got 3 left. That is the nuanced part of recruiting that I think Clemson will have to embrace at some point throughout Dabo's tenure there.
All right, Yogi Roth, great stuff. Big Ten Network. So where are you? Where are some of the better games you got coming up?
Oh, I can't wait. I mean, I can't reiterate enough how much fun it has been to be embraced by all of my new colleagues at the Big Ten Network and here at Fox. Like, it has been awesome going to these campuses. I'm seeing so many familiar faces, like Kirk Campbell, the OC at Michigan. His brother was my teammate in college. Like, it was just kind of fun, like just seeing all these old school connections. But week 1, we're heading to Oregon in Eugene. Week 2, we got SC coming off the LSU game, which will be a blast. And then week 3, and I'm high on SC. I've been high on them.
Like playoff high?
I don't know about that, but to me, they're in the top 3rd of the Big Ten. They might be in the bottom part of that top 3rd after my little training camp tour. But when I look at totality of the Big Ten last year, yes, defenses were amazing. Numbers were elite. They didn't face Bo Nix, Michael Penix Jr., Caleb Williams. Like, they didn't face Ethan Garbers. Like, the West Coast quarterbacks are so gifted. I think they are going to really challenge this league in a way this league has not been challenged. So to that point, week 3, I'm going to be at Nebraska coming off their Colorado game, and we referenced Dylan Raiola. So that'll be fun. And then, who knows where we'll go, but I'm hoping we get back to Pennsylvania, go to a Penn State game. I mean, I went to a game in '99. Arizona at Penn State was the first game of my life watching college football in high school.
Give me one name of a star at Arizona '99. Did they have an edge rusher who went high in the draft, or was
I know on the other side it was LeVar Arrington.
Oh, LeVar Arrington, Penn State. Yes,
I mean, I saw him walk out the tunnel. He got injured in the first half, and the whole place just went completely silent. And then if you've been to that stadium, that deep tunnel, the shadow of him comes out in the 3rd quarter with just his jersey and pants on, and it was this roar. And I remember whispering to myself, like, Yogi, you're going to play major college football. Like, you have to taste an environment
100,000
like
people
that.
freaking out, right?
It was off the charts, man. So I hope to get to all those places. We're going to be doing shows every Monday on the Big Ten Network, and then, of course, every Saturday with Guy Haberman and Rhett Lewis, my new partner. So I'm thrilled, man. I'm so stoked to be part of it.
Congrats, and we're looking forward to it.
Thanks, bro.
Yogi Roth. Coming up next, the top challenger to dethrone the Chiefs in the AFC. I'll tell you who that is next.
Champions aren't born. They are built. And come this time of year, if you're